of protests and the Islamic Republic's response. The death may mark the start of a heavier-handed response by the Revolutionary Guards and the Basij over the demonstrations. While the demonstrations have slowed in the capital, they have expanded in other areas. The fatalities occurred in 4 cities, largely home to Iran's Lur ethnic group. Iran's civilian government under reformist President Masoud Pezeshkian has been trying to signal that it wants to negotiate with the protesters. However, he has acknowledged that nothing much can be done right now. He says Iran's currency has rapidly depreciated, with $1 now costing some 1.4 million rials.
مردم ناراضی هستند. ما مقصریم. شما مقصرید. دنبال آمریکا نگردید، دنبال نمیدونم کسی دیگه نرید. ماییم که باید خدمت بدیم به اونا از ما راضی باشن. ماییم باید که منابعمون رو درست مدیریت کنیم. ماییم باید راه پیدا کنیم و مشکل حل کنیم.
The protests and the Washington threat come 6 months after US bombed Iranian nuclear sites during the Iran's 12-day war with Israel. Iran has said it is no longer enriching uranium at any site in the country. Meanwhile, Ali Lariani, the senior advisor to Ayatollah Khamenei, has warned the US against interference. He said that the US meddling in Iranian protests would lead to chaos across the region. And the big question I asked today is, can there be a regime change in Iran? And what makes Iranian regime so persistent and tight? On this issue, I'm joined by Catherine Perez-Shakdam, expert on West Asia, and Professor Swaran Singh, Center for International Studies, JNU. Catherine joins me from London. Catherine, your opening comments on what's happening inside Iran.
Okay, so the first thing, thank you for having me, by the way, and Happy New Year. What I wanted to say is that, look, it has nothing to do with inflation. Everything that you see currently in the streets has everything to do with Iranians saying no to Ayatollah Khamenei and the regime in general. They have lived under occupation for decades. This regime came by way of a coup d'etat. They call it a revolution. It wasn't a revolution. A revolution would mean that people wanted change to take place. What happened was, it was a hijacking of the left, who made an alliance with Islamic radicals, impersonified by Ayatollah Khomeini at the time. And Khamenei was quick to take over. So what you see is an attempt by the regime, by the Islamofascists, to continue to grab hold of a country and 80 million people within it and prevent them to breathe. Because really, what we're talking about in Iran is the inability that Iranians have to breathe, to choose the manner in which they dress, to choose whether they feel they want to pursue a particular religion or another, or not at all. They have zero freedom, they have no say, and women are treated like cattle. And I think it needs to change.
Okay. Professor Swaran Singh, your opening comments, and then I get down to the larger issue of, do you think that these protests really make a difference to IRGC and Ayatollah?
I think the protests definitely reflect the discomfort that people feel. But two things are important to understand. One, Iran is not the only country that could be described the way my co-panelists just mentioned about the freedoms that are available to people in Iran. Several neighboring countries could be likewise described. Second, that repeatedly there have been instability, whether it is in terms of palace intrigues. For example, in 1989, when the last Ayatollah passed away, there were largest number of executions, more than 1,500 that year. We had similar protests in 2009, then 2022, and now. So repeatedly protests happening, some kind of increasing instability at the level of leadership or people on the street is a reflection of things not being fine. Now, some of that could also be externally orchestrated, which I think is also a part that needs to be understood, that how again and again the whole focus on isolating Iran has resulted in enormous sanctions and therefore economic troubles for Iran, which has a main source of earning for them is oil in that sense. And if that kind of foreign trade export is denied to them, obviously that leads to economic problems, unemployment, unrest, and so on. And so it's a complex picture where what is very certain here is that repeatedly instability and turmoil has not really so far managed to remove the regime, which as my co-panelists mentioned, is in occupation for last 45 plus years in Iran. And in that sense, despite talks about factions and frictions within the regime, the fact that they have still institutions which you could look at them either as opportunities for adaptation and change or illusions of adaptation and change. But there is elections, there's parliament, there are councils that perhaps create at least orchestration of people looking at possibilities of change and adaptation in the regime. And I think in that sense, broad-based cohesion within various organs of the government, led by the supreme leader, have so far managed to survive for 45 years, as we are saying. But regime change is something which can't be predicted so easily. These things happen out of blue. One after another examples are there. But people on the ground, as they are unhappy, they also see that turmoil and instability in the neighborhood, whether it is Syria or Libya or Iraq, has created greater problems after foreign intervention was made. So they will also be cautious of seeking any foreign intervention. So I think that kind of complex picture so far looks like very difficult to predict as to which way things are going.
Okay. Catherine, these protests, are these about women, inflation, culture, rights? 20 years ago, when the social media came into people's life, there was a Twitter revolution which took place in Tehran. In fact, a book came out of it. People were tweeting a lot of things. It was more about culture. So how do we in which perspective are we supposed to frame these protests which have broken out?
Look, again, I don't think it's not just one element. I think it's been a combination of things that took place over the past decades. I believe that Iranians have no more ground to give in terms of their freedom, in terms of the brutality that they face at the hands of the regime. When everything has been taken away from you, and more importantly, your future, Iranians today are facing a reality where it is better to be dead than to face another day under that kind of regime. And I want people to think about this, because when you see mothers who have everything to lose, including their children, with the very real possibility that their loved one will be taken to Evin prison as well, just for fun, because the regime likes to toy with people. And you understand that those women are still willing to face the guns and the cannons. You need to understand that something is terribly wrong with this picture. So when you see Iranians take to the streets and they burn down RGC bases and they call on people to defect, in essence, to Reza Shah, the Crown Prince of Iran, who has made several repeated calls for support from the international community and from within the diaspora, as well as within Iran. You understand that, again, Iranians have made the decision that enough is enough. And so I don't want to frame this. I think that for the first time, what you're looking at is actually a real revolution. And I think there's a beautiful symmetry. When the Shah, the late Shah, left, we misunderstood. The man left because he believed that he could find help in the likes of America and the West. What he didn't realize is that he had been betrayed, and that the left decided to enable, and I have to say that the French government has a lot to answer to enable the arrival of a cleric, believing that they would be able to manipulate him into giving up the best, what Iran had best to give, which is its natural resources. Now, it didn't work out because, you know how history went. France got frozen out, and things went from bad to worse. So this, what you see, is a revolution in the sense that they are reclaiming the land that was stolen away from them, but their future. So when you see young people in the streets calling for the end of the regime, it's not just, a state of let's go on the internet and let's create a buzz. No, they want their lives back. They want a future. They want to be able to say, I'm gonna have a family one day. I'm gonna raise children, and those kids will be free. I don't think that people understand to which point people cannot breathe in Iran. Everything has been taken away from people. And it's very difficult when you're here in the West and you enjoy the freedoms that we do enjoy very much, to understand what it feels like to have no choice whatsoever about in the manner in which you dress or how you pray, who you pray to, whether you're an ethnic minority or just basically a woman. And again, women are reduced to nothing. I was in Iran and I saw the way that they treat women. It's appalling, absolutely appalling. So things need to change. And look, I think that the difference now is that there is a leadership. There's been a call by Reza Shah, the Crown Prince of Iran, to rise. And people are rising. They're rallying to their king. And I think that this is the only way forward. Monarchies have a way to withstand the likes of Islamofascism a lot better than our democracy do. The reason being, they have studied us and they understand that democracies have politicians working for it, and that those politicians can be sold and bought. And so we have a problem in the West, is that we don't understand that we are being taken over, and that what happened in Iran in 1979 could very well happen here. And this could be exploited. And I would encourage democracies around the world to pay close attention, because once they arrive and they integrate and infiltrate your country, it is very difficult to make them go.
Okay, Professor Swaran Singh, coming back to this issue, I know Catherine made some very important points. When we talk about rights have a value are embedded in a ideology. It's a different political system, but Iran itself is embedded in a different ideology, which is Islamic system, Islamic values. So what is making this system endure? There are people outside, but there are people also committed to the values of Ayatollah. Is there a clash between them?
There is definitely a very strong fault line or set of fault lines that are emerging. But the fact that the regime has survived for 45 plus years is the only way to understand that they either have the techniques or tools to survive, or they have certain amount of orchestration of people accepting their regime. I fully agree with my co-panelists that, the younger generation, there is again a generational shift in Iran. If I'm right, about 60% of Iran population is less than 35. They are globally connected. There's a clear erosion of their faith in Islamic theologies or Shia theologies, which makes them repeatedly question being ruled by a supreme leader, a religious cleric in that sense. But despite all these things and economic troubles on the ground, young people without jobs, inflation going up to 40% in December, issue is that yes, fault lines are there, things are not fine. And of course, we know that Shah Pahlavi's son has tweeted that I am with you, etc. Even the US State Department has tweeted about their support if people are unhappy on the ground. But you remember, President Trump was specifically asked this question on Monday after his meeting with Netanyahu, and during the joint press conference, he kind of deviated in answer. He didn't answer that question.
But Professor Swaran Singh, what is really important is that this time Trump is saying that we are loaded and packed and all that on an issue which is right now a domestic concern. When it comes to the issue of nukes, people still have an idea it can impact the entire security of West Asia. But this time intervention is on a very the threatened intervention is on a very different issue, which can primarily be described as a dissent within a country. So one can also factor in that the Americans are getting bolder when it comes to Iran. I've really run short of time. Thank you for the perspective, Catherine, and thank you for a very detailed analysis, Professor Swaran Singh. So this is all I had on point 2. Coming up next, 90 days to go for the government to eradicate left-wing extremism. Will they achieve it?
सामने एक नया सुपरमार्केट खुलने वाला है, क्या करें कि
country that we cannot access, which has come down to just about 4,000 square kilometers, and it is now reduced to, I'm told,
Absolutely.
just about 3 like that.
Absolutely. Yeah. This war against Naxalism is both ideological and military on ground, because to expound it, started saying ye azadi jhuti hai, they were trying to discredit Indian democratic structure. And ideologically and through other slogans, they took it down. An ultimate objective was to seize power through armed struggle. And they tried to romanticize it. But Mr. Nathaniel, before I come to that, I really want to know, as a citizen of this country, what is working now? I mean, to the last 4 or 5 years, what is working now? These graphics tell me the sort of success which security forces are having now in last 10 years is stupendous.
My good wishes to all your panelists and even the viewers. I wish them a very happy new year. In fact, regarding the problem that had crept up a few decades back, the problem was that our forces were not fully prepared to tackle these chaps. Initially, when they raised their heads in West Bengal, the CRPF was able to control them, and within a few years, it was almost finished. But later on, they again started having their roots down south in Telangana, previous Andhra Pradesh, and other parts of southern India, and of course, right stretching from Nepal to South India. The problem was that when the forces started getting inducted in Chhattisgarh, that time we suffered quite a lot of casualties. And that was not because of anything, but because the familiarity of the terrain was not there with the security forces. So gradually they got hold of the situation over there. And over a period of time, they have been so well trained that they have been able to take them on. And even our intelligence has become so robust that we were able to track them down wherever they were hiding. And in recent years, we were able to conduct operations in even Abujmart, which was hitherto known as a fortress for these Naxal ideology people. And because of the ideology that they had, and because of the shelter that they were getting from the locals by either force or persuasion, they were able to sit comfortably in Abujman. But once the roads were constructed in these areas, the forces were able to penetrate deep into Abujmart and get control over the villages, and thereby depriving the intelligence for the Maoists and getting better intelligence for our own security forces. That was the reason why we were able to penetrate everywhere. And main thing was the construction of roads also. Because of the construction of roads, the forces were able to penetrate even deeper. And otherwise, prior to the construction of roads, whenever forces were advancing in these areas, they were generally mined, the roads were mined, and the vehicles were blasted also.
Okay. Let me ask one political question to you, sir. But you must have encountered it. I want your comment on that. What about there's Maoism, Naxalism, but there's a institutionalized political communalism. Institutionalized leftism, which celebrates this. Did you encounter it when you were going for the operation, that culture?
No, at least the central forces have no such problem at all. And we had the independence to carry out operations whenever we had any intelligence from the intelligence bureau or other security forces. And we were able to carry out operations independently without any problem. And that was helping us in chasing these fellows and capturing them or even eliminating them whenever there was an encounter. So there has been no political problem as such, because the forces were given a free hand to take on these militants, these Maoists, wherever they were present.
Okay. Mr. Ramnivas, do you think that the change in strategy played a bigger role, or the tech innovation which that has happened in the last 20 years in terms of surveillance and detection?
Basically, there are so many factors. First, the policy decisions at the state level as well as the central level.
Okay.
So the second thing is the structural changes in the Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, Bihar, and the CRPF. As my colleague has told, that initially they were totally unknown to this terrain. They were not familiar with the terrain, so the structural changes were made in the operations also, that the locals were included in the operations, and then the induction training were basically conducted for the CAPF also, and then the involvement of the public, that is the local villagers and then the local press people, and then the perception at the center also, and the perception at the state and the central level also changed. So many factors basically included in everything, and that is why the central police forces, the state police forces, and then the central government, state government, and the local public, and the local in Jharkhand also, and in Chhattisgarh also, particularly DRG groups and the involvement of the local guerrilla forces. We can say the guerrilla forces would, and the surrender Naxals were also involved in operations. So all these things, they made the drastic changes. And the training. Basically, the Chhattisgarh police initially were not able to take on with the Naxalite tactics. And the induction of the CRPF and then the other forces, they also supported very well. And this air support was also there. And technologically, at 2008, when we initially basically started this drone technology, it was totally failure at that time because the heavy machinery and the heavy battery structure. But later on, when the light drone were introduced, so now we are getting very good intelligence. And then the 3,320 BSNL towers were basically inducted into the Bastar area. So there was a little hiccup at the initial stage, at the central level also and the state level also, that whether it will help the security forces or it will help the next side. But the decision was taken, and then this tech intelligence, the BSNL induction of the BSNL towers.
Okay.
So all these things have led, and I will say that the firm decision by the Honorable Home Minister, that has made a drastic change, because all these forces were ready, the public was ready, but only the decision, we have to do it by such and such date. That is one of the very important factors for this thing.
Absolutely. Absolutely, sir. Closing comment from General Kulkarni, sir. Do you think Punjab has been a very successful example? It has not made a comeback. We have resolved the issues in Mizoram. We continue to battle terrorism in Kashmir because there is a border. Do you think that Naxalism do have the capacity to make a comeback unless de-radicalization is also carried out?
Kartikeya, all said and done, whatever, you must walk the talk. If the delivery of the welfare schemes are there on ground, if the people there, why did they do what they were doing? Because they felt that the state wasn't responding to their needs. If the state is now responding in all means, whether their livelihoods are concerned, their education is concerned, their entire setup is concerned, all the loans have been given to them, I think if the welfare schemes play up and the people there realize that yes, the state is very much concerned about them, obviously all these people who decided to start with Majumdar until all of these people are being knocked off, you will find surrenders will come. Surrenders have to come. Because why? The thing was, if 40,000 square kilometers you could not enter, and today all of it is yours for means of communication, whether it is welfare schemes in place and people realizing it. Yes, the jobs are there. There's so much happening in the country, and that they're being left out of it. The governments are proactive. I think surely the government must keep the word. That is very important. The state government must keep the word. But there should be no complacency whatsoever. Lovely teams have come up. Whether we have Cobras, we have Greyhounds, we have Tuskers, we have Jaguars, everyone. All of these teams must continue to keep doing it, and at least for the next 10 years, ensure that nothing of this crops up. We have good communication, and therefore the state must deliver, and the country must ensure, and whatever they've stated, they must get it.
Absolutely,
there is
sir.
Going back for the board.
Absolutely, sir. And this is going to be an historic year if there is an announcement by end of March, as stated by the government of India, that left-wing extremism is dead. I think that's going to be a historic announcement, and 2026 will be remembered for that. Thank you all of you for joining me in this conversation. And this is all I had on Point tonight. I'll see you on Monday at the same time, which is 7 p.m. Thank you and good night.
Ever wondered what makes the night come alive? Where flavors, lights and laughter dance in harmony. When the sun sets, stories rise. Of kitchens, cocktails and charisma. What makes your city's night so happening? Let's find out.
Good service, good food and a good location.
You need to explore, you need to experiment.
But they will never forget how they felt when they came to your restaurant.
Being a chef, it's my priority to deliver taste in a plate with good presentation, unique innovation.
My definition of mixology would be to get people drunk in a safe and a happy way.
Don't drink on the job, that's for sure.
Mixology, you can play around with anything. You can create the stories, you can create the recipes.
Let's cheers on that note with our friendship.
Indulge in the finer things in life with Radico presents Lounge Nights. Discover the creme de la creme of India's culinary and nightlife scene. From trendy bars to exquisite restaurants, we've got you covered.